if community development is going to be real, and I think it's what this work is really based in, is you start working with a group and you take a step. And because you've taken this step, you then figure out what the next step is going to be. And after this step, you figure out what the next step is going to be. And it's true that you're headed in a direction. You know, if you're making a play about violence, you're not making it because you think violence is a good thing, you know? You know, like the play has an agenda, of course, but so it sits in a container, but you don't know what the end product is going to be. And often there are really wonderful and sometimes challenging surprises.
Imaginaction podcast.
Imagination.
Creando comunità trasformative per il
Imagination
futuro.
podcast.
Social arts across borders.
Hello, welcome to Imaginaction podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking with David Diamond about his journey to discover and found theater for living. Enjoy.
I discovered theater at 17, when I was 17, kind of fell into the theater. I wanted to be a writer, and I tried to get a writing course in my school, and there wasn't one, but there was this drama program, and I don't know, I'd never been to see a play, but it was artistic. And so I started doing drama, and I know this sounds weird. Well, maybe lots of people experience this, but I was getting applause then for doing things on stage that I was getting punished for doing things in my life. and this whole world opened up of self-expression and being validated. And so then I decided to become an actor, and I went off to theater school, and I came out of theater school and was an actor in mainstream theater, working all over Western Canada, film, TV, live stage, radio. And then got frustrated, me and a number of people, because the actor's job is to sit by the telephone and say yes to anything that comes. And most of it's shit, frankly. And we wanted to make something about something meaningful. And so we all had housing problems. And so we made a play about organizing for affordable housing. And we didn't know we were going to start a theater company, but it was this massive cult hit. It took us completely by surprise. It was angry, and it named politicians and demanded resignations, and it was funny, and it had music in it, and we rewrote it every day based on what was happening in the news, and it played in a different place every night, so you had to really work to find it. And it was packed every night. And so then there was another project, and then I took over. It had been a collective, and the collective kind of dissolved, and it got handed to me. I turned into the person who was raising money and booking tours, and then helping write the shows and acting in the shows. And there was obviously something there, but I had a question inside me. We'd been really good at doing agitprop theater, agitation propaganda theater. We would decide what the issue was. We would go and interview people who were living the issue, and then we'd lock ourselves in a room, pretend we were them, and write a play about them, aimed at them. And because we were young, I think, we all also thought we knew all the answers. So we would tell them what to do in the play to solve their problems, and we were good at it. And I think sometimes agitprop is important to do. But I wondered about how to do it with them, not for them. And I managed to get some invitations to go to the UK to visit John McGrath, who was the director of 784 Theatre Company. We'd become friends by then. 784 was the oldest socialist theater in the UK at the time. And Dave Johnston, who was director at Theatre Centre, which was a really well-respected theatre and education company in London. And before I left, I wanted something to read. And I went to a bookstore and I picked up this book by this guy I'd never heard of, Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I just liked the title. I didn't know what it was. And I'm traveling through Europe, having a very valuable time with wonderful people, and I'm reading this book and it's blowing my mind because it's actually answering the question I had. And then I ended up at a conference where a guy named Chris Vine, who many people will know, he's now in New York, was doing a demonstration of this thing called Forum Theater by this guy, Augusto Boal, another Brazilian. And I'm sitting there going, holy shit, that's what I'm reading about in this book. They're the same thing. And Boal at that point was in Paris, having left Brazil, and was offering a skills sharing workshop in 2 weeks. And, you know, the magic of Europe, boom, off to Paris. And Boal and I hit it off. I think because I was already making political theater. And so the doorway in was like with everybody, you know, a long step by step journey where I think I just kept following my nose, frankly. And so then I came back here with all this stuff from Boal and didn't know what to do with it. And just when I got back, wrote a play called The Enemy Within. I got that title from Margaret Thatcher, and toured that play. It was about busting unions. It was actually a character assassination of the current premier of British Columbia coming up into the election. It was agitprop. And trying to figure out what to do with all this theater of the oppressed stuff. And then, you know, because this is how my brain works, I already had a touring network. So I booked a tour of workshops. I worked a process out on paper, 5 days, to take a group from zero to performance. It looked good on paper, but the only way to know if it worked was to do it. And so 6 or 7 communities across British Columbia went, yeah, this sounds interesting. We'll do this. We'll bring groups together. And, you know, and I was very clear with them. I had no idea what I was doing. We were going on an adventure together. And the first one was with the Stalo Nation, an indigenous nation just up the valley here from Vancouver. And lo and behold, we made really important plays about issues in the community and had a powerful forum theater event in the community. And it was raw, and it was, you know, there were, you know, 40 years later, I might do things differently than happened then, but it was very powerful. And over the course of the tour, with the generosity of all these people, I figured out what I was doing. And then, you know, started larger projects, and the company flourished, and people responded very powerfully to the work. And, you know, I'll just say, because I think it's important for people to hear stuff like this. At one point, you know, it was getting a lot of attention, and this is before email. Boal and I would communicate on paper through the mail. And I wrote to him and I said, you know, I feel like an imposter. There's lots of media and I'm doing interviews and people are loving the work, but I feel like I'm doing somebody else's work. And I'm just lying. And he wrote me back this very generous letter and he said, look, all of us go through that. if you're getting attention and people are liking what you're doing, it's because of what you're doing, not because of anybody else. So relax. And this was very important for me from him in that moment. And I think everybody who does this work really needs to take that in, because you have to make the work your own. It's the only way to do it. You can't do somebody else's work, because it's also about continuing to invent it as you go. Otherwise, it just becomes mechanical. And once it becomes mechanical, it's dead.
Yeah, well, this is a good build up for the second question, which is around what has been guiding you, what has been your inner lighthouse or guides outside that have been guiding you in this long journey, that not easy journey. A lot of people give up, change, not an easy life or journey.
When we started, of course, we had to do marketing. And there was this wonderful woman, her name is Saide, and she was in a play. Saide, is a dear friend. She knows I tell stories about her. It's fine. Saide came to Canada as a refugee from Iran, although she is originally from Pakistan. She married an Iranian. They were in Iran hiding students under Khomeini. They got caught. They had to leave. They spent some time in Italy and then came here. She and I met through Amnesty International. And she was an actor in a play that I did about refugee issues. And she got very turned on by the work. And it ended up working with me for 8 years. And she was the theater company's first outreach coordinator. There's a saying, Saide could sell a hump to a camel. She was incredible. And she would get on the phone. We had this thing called the Red Book, and it had all the kind of social service agencies in it listed. And she would just get on the phone and phone them and be able to get into long conversations with people and say, I have this thing that you need. And, for every 30 phone calls Saide would make, there'd be one person who was really interested in more than just talking to her, but the work started to book. And we eventually had to stop her because we couldn't respond to the work. We had to go, you have to stop. And at one point there was a facilitation team, and we couldn't deal with it. And I think that's important for people, because people are reluctant to sell themselves. But it has to start somewhere. There's a difference between getting an invitation because you've contacted somebody and gotten them interested, and then they've invited you. There's a difference between that and imposing yourself on a community. Going, well, I have this great thing and I'm coming to rescue you. They're not the same thing. But eventually, I made a decision that the marketing would stop and that we would only respond to invitations that came. Email would come, the phone would ring, because knowledge had built out in communities. But it took years. And so the question about what has guided me is invitations. And trying to make sure they're legitimate invitations. That it's not just, the person, because you don't know who's getting in touch with you. It could be the community wacko. You don't know. And so, one of the things I always do is I insist that there's a committee of people working to bring me in, not one lone person, because you don't know. And so, because it's invitations, that also in conversation determines how the work should happen. It's about designing something that will be healthy in the community, knowing that once you get there and actually meet the people you're going to work with, that might all go out the window. but I want to come in with a plan, otherwise I don't feel safe. And so, yeah, invitations have guided me, and also building strong connections with lots of communities. And again, you know, following your nose. There are things that bubble up that need attention. And, you know, so sometimes a project would happen because a community would invite it, and it would turn into a big project. The meth play was invited and ended up touring all over Western Canada. And sometimes it would be me going, I think it'd be important to do a play on gang violence, and contacting communities that were struggling with it and going, would this be a good idea? You know, this is who we are, you know, would this be good? And them going, it would be fantastic. And, you know, the gang violence play was created and performed in a Sikh temple here in Vancouver. That's how deeply it was embraced by the community. And so what guides you is authentic relationships, I guess, is what it boils down to. You know, I've done a lot of arguing with people about this. People in the mainstream theater, because outreach, community outreach, and marketing are not the same thing. And they get confused. Marketing is trying to sell something, you know, and community outreach is simply having legitimate, authentic, mutually beneficial relationships with people and organizations. And so, you know, with the theater company, sometimes we would be able to go, oh, organization A, do you know organization B? You don't? You need to know each other, because you can do things together that would be amazing. And that had nothing to do with any project we were doing. You know, it was just us being a good community member. And, you know, is there a byproduct of that that's good for the company? Yes, there is, because people trust you. You know, you're not always trying to sell them something. You're not always trying to get them to do you a favor and come see your play. You're, you know, and so it's relationships. I think the answer to your question is relationships.
I hear relationships, and I also remember the first answer, which is this relationship, this a magical helper, and a relationship as well. And this also, this kind of, I wrote this work for the invitation, which is like work with invitation, but it's also working to being in the position to be invited, which is also connected about building community and connections, even if it's not benefiting you directly somehow, because it's part of being. And then I wrote like, you said now being a good community member.
Yeah, you know, and just to come back full circle, I have had this conversation with many people who do this kind of work, and they're very reluctant to kind of try to sell themselves. Well, how are invitations supposed to start coming if nobody knows who you are? Like, I actually understand that it's in a way distasteful, but it's necessary. And then if your work is good, invitations will start to come. But the community will tell you.
So I want to bring it to the third question, which actually brings us to another territory of this work, which is the frustrations, the challenges. So what have been or still could be have been
Well,
frustrations and challenges you have met?
yeah. So, I mean, the really big one for me, and the reason I closed the company now 2 years ago, is, part of what was really important for me in it is that whenever somebody's doing something for the organization, it's work. And we live in a capitalist culture, whether we like to admit that or not. And what pays the rent, what buys the food is money. And so people need to be paid. And they need to be paid, for me, above union wages, because it's hard work. And so that meant I was fundraising every day of my life. And because the work is what it is, it really exists on the edges of what funders think is fundable. What do you mean you're going to bring a group of people together and you actually don't know what the end result play is going to be? Give us a script and we'll see if we want to fund it. Well, I can't do that. It's going to get created as we're doing it. And I also need you to understand that because it's, there's an empowerment aspect to this, that the people making it, it's possible they're going to make a play that is contrary to the priorities of the funding body. and that needs to be okay. And so, funding was often hard to get. It started up a good 10 years ago. This thing, I don't know if you're dealing with this, it's called social innovation now. And it's a corporate model of community development. So if community development is going to be real, and I think it's what this work is really based in, is you start working with a group and you take a step. And because you've taken this step, you then figure out what the next step is going to be. And after this step, you figure out what the next step is going to be. And it's true that you're headed in a direction. If you're making a play about violence, you're not making it because you think violence is a good thing. Like the play has an agenda, of course, but so it sits in a container, but you don't know what the end product is going to be. And often there are really wonderful and sometimes challenging surprises. But in social innovation, that model, they want a 3 to 5 year arc and predetermined outcomes. It's a corporate model, and it is in direct opposition to how I think this work can be healthy. And I tried for a while to dance that dance with them, and but it's anti-ethical to the work. And so I started getting into big arguments with funders. And instead of the money being easier after many years of success, it was getting harder. So that was a frustration. Another frustration, sometimes was, when I said you don't know who is inviting you. I was very careful about stuff. And even with that, there were sometimes shocking surprises. So, being invited into a community to do work and being very clear, of course, that the work is voluntary. You can't force people to do this sort of stuff. And that the participants, we would provide all this material, and the participants need to have some sense of what they're coming to do. Otherwise, how can they agree that they want to do it? And arriving places and having a group of youth, literally, I mean this, marched into the room that I was waiting in single file. And they've discovered they're going to make plays on addiction issues this morning. They got told this morning. And now we're sitting there and they don't know who I am, and they don't know really why they're there. And I'm going, oh, what the hell just happened? And, I explained the best I could and said to them, you're pissed off. I'm pissed off. It's not supposed to be like this. Look, because I'd driven 10 hours. This is, Canada. It's a different guy, 10 hours to be there. And I explained, and I said, look, just give me 2 or 3 hours. Let me give you a taste of what this is. And if you don't want to do it, I honor that. It's over. And they said, okay. And we did some stuff, and they didn't want to do it. It had been brought together terribly badly. And I said, right, okay. And then I walked into the office, and we had a huge fight. And I'm not afraid to do that. They were, from my point, in breach of contract and owed me the whole fee, which of course they never paid. and, and those sorts of things didn't happen often. But when you ask about frustration, that's a big deal. And I'm not sure frustrated is the right word, but I'm very concerned with the state of the Theatre of the Oppressed community. It's not just happening in TO. I think it's happening all over the world right now, is that the world is polarizing. And it's also happening in the TO community. It's been happening for some time, since Boel died. And I have a fear that there are aspects of the community, not the whole community, that are becoming a mirror of the very thing they say they're fighting against. And this is happening all over the world. And it is the thing that concerns me the most in the world right now. How do we build bridges between people with whom we disagree and not build more walls?
I was talking some time ago, before this whole COVID, with one of the people I'm collaborating with a social innovation project. It's hell, but you have to do it. No, but I was trying to explain what I do and what's my vision, and I said that I'm trying to build bridges in a world made of islands, and I. By the way, that was also one of the names for the PPLG where we met, was also building bridges, And I really feel that this is part of the deep sense of the reason of this work. And I also hear all the frustrations, how do we explain the work to funders? How do we explain the logic, which is different than everything else that is around almost? And then how do we not become a mirroring of what we're trying to change? That's and the depth of somehow this polarization or this kind of disconnection that is happening. So
yeah, and there are big questions building in me. I'm in Canada, in Vancouver. Of course, when we're watching what's happening in the United States, what happens there affects us fast. There's an old saying that the United States sneezes and Canada catches a cold. But a few days ago, here in Vancouver, we had a 1,000 person anti-mask demonstration. And I was talking with a friend about this last night, and I don't know what to do with that. Like, I am this guy who wants to create dialogue, but I don't understand it. And all I can imagine doing is like screaming and going, how stupid are you? And I'm embarrassed by that because I don't have an answer. I don't know what's happened. And it's become so political Like there's nothing political about it. And it's, it's become really political. And, I've said over and over again, the best forum theater is theater about things we actually don't have answers to. And so somehow this would make a great forum theater play, but I have given up my company. And nobody seems to be inviting me to do it right now. But, it's, when we talk about frustration, I don't know if the word is frustration, but there's deep concern right now.
Well, maybe someone listening to this podcast will say, well, I want to do this play, and we'll call you.
Yeah, maybe.
I know you have had your challenges with this whole Zoom transformation situation, and I agree. It's even hard to even imagine how to do this work, and it's a whole other interview we can do as well. But I do feel that there are some opportunities here to at least exchange knowledge and wisdom and learn from each other.
Absolutely that. I'm in some kind of Zoom conversation every day now. And have, facilitated meetings, 60-person meetings now in Zoom. I'm using it a lot. But I also, know that, right now it's just you and me. And part of us might believe that we're looking each other in the eye, but we're not.
We're looking at each other's eyes.
But there's also that, we're looking at pixels. I'm not looking at flesh and blood. We're looking at pixels. And it's a miracle that we can do that, It's a wonderful magic miracle, but we're not looking each other in the eye.
So I want to bring us to the next question, which is going from the challenges and the frustration into the gifts, the treasures, the discoveries, what you're taking home, the things you have found on this path. And I can see the beautiful artwork in the back, but
and they're gifts, actually. There are many of them around here. Lots of gifts. And lots and lots of many kinds of gifts. It's been a very privileged place with the company, the ability to have really wacky ideas and do them, and actually do them, and have large groups of people come together to make them real was a huge gift. I'm not, I've done a lot of traveling for work, and I'm not a good tourist. I've never been a good tourist. But I've had the privilege of being invited really deep into community and have seen people and heard people who've been very, very generous with me as we've created things together. And my understanding of so many things has been broadened. It's a constant education. Part of that, if I can just take a little detour, part of that is realizing many years ago now that my job wasn't to come in understanding maybe anything. My job was to come in with a skill set that was adaptable and co-create with these people who were the experts in the subject matter. I know this sounds maybe weird, counterintuitive for people, but I didn't have to research the subject matter. I let go of doing that because the people in the room contain the subject matter. And the more I come in with preconceptions about what that might be, the more I disrespect them. And I think part of the wonderful chemistry that happens is they figure that out. They figure out that this person isn't trying to impose their own perceptions of the issue on them, that we really are co-creating, and things light on fire. Because I think people don't get a chance to do that often. And that's a gift. That kind of trust is a gift. Yes, so many gifts. And I guess I'll just say this again, the broadening and the depth of seeing the world in all of its complexity. Understanding that in some ways, all of us are oppressed oppressors. That everybody has complexity. And letting go of kind of a more us and them kind of image that I had when I was a lot younger. That was, convenient because it made things easier. It felt like it made things easier to understand. It certainly made my political organizing simpler, But speaking very personally, it was uninformed and it was lazy.
So I very resonate with this journey. And I wrote, before I wrote about them, it was about them, and now I wrote us, it's about us. and it's, this kind of seeing the world, and then through that seeing community, meeting community, the experts in that, finding something that meets, challenges and changes you as well. And this is, let's say, the last question from this series of questions, which is really about the path, is, now from where you're sitting, if you would have a chance to talk with your younger self, or with a younger self that is just starting now, what would be your advice to someone just starting this path?
Don't try to rush. It's funny, I repeat this two sentences over and over again in many ways because it had a really profound effect on me, but I think it is the answer. It is my answer to the question you're asking. And it comes out of Freire and the pedagogy of hope. We can't get there from there. We can only get there from here. And so the advice is to be where you are. Not in a way that is inert. One needs forward momentum, but to embrace where you are and work from there, not from where you wish you were. Because you aren't where you wish you were. You're where you are. I years ago did a project called Reclaiming Hope from a Culture of Fear. And I did some of those when I was in Europe last summer before we did the PPLG. And in preparation for that, I did some research on hope and was surprised. I'd always thought hope was an emotion. Hope is a verb. And in order to hope, this is now people who study brains and thoughts and stuff, comes out of their work. In order to hope, there's a few things that have to happen. we have to recognize where we are. And we have to be able to imagine some better place. And we have to be able to imagine some kind of steps to that better place. Or hoping doesn't actually occur. And so hope is an intransitive verb. To hope means to see a horizon, a better horizon. It's really interesting. It's not just an emotion. Hope is essential to doing this work. Otherwise, what are we doing? Because at one point, I got tired of making projects that were fighting against the world I didn't want. And I made a very conscious decision to adapt the work, to try to work towards the world I do want. And the way I talk about the work in creation processes, and the way I work with groups, and actually explain this, so that we're creating something that is trying to work towards the world we want, not just fight against the world we don't.
So this is a great build-up and I'm going to bunch three of the next questions into one, and I'm going to ask you. And I had a difficulty to find the phrasing here. Hector suggested your wildest dream. What is your wildest dream? But
I invented an exercise that I call your wildest dream.
Yes, I know. But I want to also connect it with this hope. And there is a book by John Macy, Active Hope. Because next week I'm interviewing a good friend, Ron Bonzo, and we had a discussion about hope, as maybe hope is not necessarily a good thing. You know about the myth of Pandora box? So the Pandora box, like all the bad things of the world were there. Yep. She kind of opened it up. She was tricked into opening it up. But anyway, what was left in the end was hope. And Ron and I, we were talking, and he was saying, well, why is it in the box anyway? Why is that in that box? And the argument was that hope is somewhere in the future, and it kind of can avoid us from being now, so that we hope for. But and I feel, what you were talking about, be here and hope, this active hope, and instead of a kind of a, let's hope it will be better, and active hope.
Yes. That if I can just say, hope isn't sitting on your sofa wishing things were better. Hope is actually moving towards. It's active. It's not inert.
So what are you hoping for now? What is this? What are you busy with? What do you right now feel that you're creating at this time?
Well, it's a very challenging time right now. For people who might see this in the far distant future, we're in the second wave of COVID-19 right now. I can't work. There were projects planned for this year and they can't happen. I'm talking with people in Australia and Switzerland, in Southern Alberta, and in Vancouver about projects we hope in 2022. And so it's a very particular time right now. Part of my hope, I hope this is going to be okay, is that little creature. Can you see a little black creature there? Yes, her name is Ramona. And today is day 6 of us sharing a space. And that's actually, I know this is like kind of away from what we're talking about, but it was really important for me to invite some playful life into my life right now. And we're being very good together, actually. We're negotiating a very healthy relationship. where she's moved into my home and my job is to serve her. But frankly,
So first of all, I wanted to say, because some people will be listening to a podcast, so just to uncover people that were thinking, Ramona, what is she? So we can say it's.
oh, Ramona is a 4-month-old black short hair cat.
Okay, because
And-
otherwise they could think it's a whole other thing.
Right, sorry. And she's asleep right now and does not like to be held and carried, or I'd bring her over and show her to you, but she really doesn't like that. So I'm gonna just leave her alone. But more to the point, I am approaching writing a second book. And that's been hard to get to, actually, during this time. I think a lot of people are experiencing that. And somehow, but part of it is because I want it to be useful. And I haven't known how to open the door to that and start writing. But people might know Fritjof Capra, a physicist. Capra wrote the foreword for my first book, and I had a communication with him just a couple of weeks ago, and wanted to bounce some things off him. And I think this book needs to be about theater for living during a time of ecological collapse. That things are coming that we should be preparing for. And interestingly, COVID has really diverted that conversation, for now anyway, but climate change is out there. The planet doesn't care about COVID. And there are things coming that are going to be very, very challenging for humanity and for all life on the planet. And how do we use artistic practice, coming back around again, to build bridges, not more walls? Because the health of humanity is going to depend on that. I believe that one of the reasons things are polarizing actually is climate change in ways we don't understand. If we accept the fact that the earth is a living thing and it's in trauma, the poles are melting, ocean currents are changing, wind currents are changing, weather patterns are changing, all kinds of things are going on. And we are, at the same time, an inconsequential and unfortunately very consequential living organism collectively on this larger organism. Why wouldn't we also be in trauma in ways we don't understand? And throughout history, when human beings have been freaking out, what have they done? They've sought out strong leaders who are going to rescue them. And fascism is rising around the world. And I believe it's not the only reason why, right? But it's a contributing factor. And we're not thinking that way. And so theater for living during a time of ecological collapse, I don't think it's about having answers. I think it's about asking questions, trying to offer techniques, making observations, making the linkages between the theater work and the science. And although I'm not Indigenous, obviously, Indigenous communities have been very generous with me. And here's something I know, that science has come around full circle and met once again Indigenous knowledge. And that the understandings are packaged very differently, but they say the same thing, particularly through physics. And biology is embracing this, and all kinds of other scientific practices are embracing this, that the rocks and the fish and the animals and the trees and the humans are all brothers and sisters somehow, that everything is indeed interconnected, is emerging as knowledge on the planet. We are moving away from this mechanistic model that took hold through Western science and made its way through most of the world, and has been terribly detrimental to the planet and to humanity and to all life on the planet. And so there is writing to do in that realm that I hope would be useful years from now. You know, I mean, it takes 2 years to write a book, you know. I hope that I can find the path to actually really start writing. One must do one's own work. Like, nobody can do somebody else's work. And, you know, in my trainings, I say this to people. I say, you know, early on when I started doing this work, people would say to me that when I'm facilitating, they said, you know, you kind of have a Portuguese accent when you're facilitating. and I had to really think about that, because I was hearing Augusto. You know, we loved each other. We worked together in many different parts of the world, and we loved each other. He changed my life. And I had to, I think what happened is I gave myself permission for maybe too long to channel him. Oh, what would Boal do right now? You know, before I had the confidence to just be me. And I kind of understand that. When people come into trainings for me, you know, I hope this isn't my ego speaking, but I say to them, you have my permission to use me as a cop in your head, a friendly cop, for a while. But you're obliged to banish me. Promise me you're going to do that. Because you have to do your own work, not mine. And in the doing of that, you end up at the tip of your experience. And because of that, I think if you're working authentically in this work, you are a pioneer. I don't think you decide to be a pioneer. I don't think you set out to be a pioneer. I think if you're working authentically, you have no choice. You know, and you know, part of that is you'll do stuff, you know, and go, ooh, that didn't work. You know, and I'm very transparent with people. I've had this idea. I want to try something with you. Is that okay? Because I don't know if this is going to work or not. They go, yeah, okay. You know, and we're in safe enough space. And if it falls apart, so that's also really interesting. You know, I've said this often about this work, is the sign that something has died is that it stops evolving.
I wrote something about the theater of the oppressed and the theater of the oppressed tree that Augusto kept referring to. I never met him in person, but I saw many trees, many versions of trees.
Yes.
And,
A forest of trees, yes.
and actually, I wrote, and that was also my claim, that the tree, in order to grow, to be alive, it needs to keep growing. It must keep growing, and it needs other trees. It needs a forest. It needs a whole corridor of trees to
Yeah.
So yeah. So I feel that this tree, this living, it has to be growing and living. And
Yeah. And if I might add to that, trees also eventually fall down and die and nurture the earth and give birth to new trees.
Yeah. That's
The
through the
cycle of life.
mycelium. The mycelium.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. I look forward for our next conversation.
Yes, me too. This has been fun. Thank you, Uri.
לבנות קהילות
Crediamo che
טרנספורמטיביות לעתיד.
l'immaginazione,
Building transformative communities for future.
nosotros creemos que la imaginación es el derecho universal.
podcast in Imagination.
In this present moment, there's a lot of suffering in the world, and it's extremely devastating. I find, and I can get into despair of, I want to work with a more specific social issue, but I'm not sure which one. There's a lot of problems, and where's my part in that? And I think part of finding my voice is also having compassion for the voices that say, no, you're not doing good enough, or you're not making enough difference, or who are you? There needs to be time for someone to find their way in this path, in a creative arts path.
We believe imagination is our universal right and regeneration is our collective responsibility.